Gold players and below are humans too, but why does it seem to be so easy to get hard stuck? You see, I'm just like you, or I was. I started off in gold, at least I did because of the busted placement system back in Overwatch 1, and I wasn't even a gold player. You see, I had about a 90% loss rate on every character I played until I dropped into bronze and then got so scared of competitive, I didn't play it anymore for almost 6 months. At which point I rejoined competitive, but treated competitive like kid gloves. I would only play when I felt 100% warmed up, 100% ready. I would flex and fill to what the team would need. I'd hard comm and I'd get stressed out. So much so that I didn't like playing competitive at all. And I wondered why I was hard stuck. I learned a lot of things along the way about the value of competition, the way to compete in a way that's going to help you to improve. And I also learned what works for not just myself, but what works for other people. So today, I'm going to share with you 5 things that I wish I knew back when I was in gold, back when I was in silver, back when I was in bronze, and honestly, back even when I was in platinum. Now, keep in mind, a lot of these things didn't just work for me. They've worked for hundreds of people that I've coached, from bronze to Grandmaster, but I think they're especially applicable for the low to mid ranks. Number 1, the importance of mechanics. Sometimes mechanics are a little bit overrated, even in a first-person shooter game, but I think in Overwatch, they're quite important. Obviously, positioning and cooldown usage of game sense are important too, but if you put yourself in the perfect scenario and you can't hit the shots, then you're not going to get the kill, or you're not going to put the pressure, or you're going to lose the duel, or even as a support, you're not going to be able to defend yourself, and that's extremely important. You see, Overwatch was my first-person shooter games, and I had to teach myself how to get good mechanics. There's a lot of videos out there about finding the right sensitivity for you. I'm not going to be doing that in this video. What I'm going to be telling you is that if you don't have good mechanics, there's really no excuse. Playing the game, whether it's competitive, quick play, arcade, really anything, is going to increase your mechanics, but not all time is created equal. I found that competitive time and time spent in deathmatch was the highest return on investment for my aim training. Not external aim trainers, and actually sometimes not even internal aim trainers. There are some codes like VAXTA, VAXTA, and certain aim arenas that can be very useful. However, I found the biggest progress in my aim coming when I actually spent time in deathmatch and competitive mode, consistently playing and practicing the same few heroes over and over and over again. Not only did it allow me to hit my shots more often, indiscriminate of hero, but it actually helped me to understand how to win 1v1s with my mechanics besides just hitting shots. My Genji dashes got more accurate. I learned how to right click versus left click for Zenyatta. Even things like being able to hit my sleep darts more consistently and learning how to bait Genji's deflect. Some of the mechanics and dueling aspects that aren't just point and click were things that I was able to develop with more time spent in deathmatch. I highly recommend it not only for warm-up, but for specific aim training. And I also highly recommend not to spend too much time outside of the game looking for that perfect aim trainer that's going to turn you into the best player of all time. It doesn't exist. Just play the game. Number 2, the importance of hero pool, and not a hero ocean, a hero pool. A lot of us understand that swapping in Overwatch can provide a temporary, if maybe overpowered benefit, but in my experience, it's actually a little bit overrated. It can definitely help you to win an individual game, but generally the better players rank up, and the way to improve yourself is by playing your character in slightly suboptimal situations and learning how to play around the strengths and weaknesses that the enemy team throw at you. Going to Orisa might win you a game, but it's not going to necessarily make you a better tank player, and ultimately you're going to hit a wall instead of just learning how to adapt and adjust with Reinhardt. Now, I understand there are characters like Bastion, like Sleep Dart, and heroes like Iliari and Kiriko, and that make the playing tank, support, or even DPS quite difficult. However, your skill is going to be your ability to adjust and counterpick through the way that you're playing the character, not just the different character that you're picking versus the enemy team. See, a lot of players, gold, plat, silver, get stuck playing nothing but tank, DPS, support, rock, paper, scissors, missing the forest of the trees, which is that they're just not good at any of the characters. Maybe they're good enough to perform to win that one game, but that's not going to get you into plat. It's not going to get you into diamond. And while it definitely works more often than it should, it's definitely not the most efficient way of improving. You see, if you just want to win that game or find a quick, cheesy way to rank up, it may or may not work, but it's certainly not going to make you a better player. Find a couple of characters that you enjoy playing, have different strengths, different weaknesses, and swap to them depending on the circumstance, but ultimately learn how to adjust your character to fit different circumstances, because the way Overwatch 2 is designed, most characters have multiple different playstyles. Learn that, lean into that, and you'll find yourself needing to counterpick less, and you'll actually learn the characters better so that you'll be able to rank up a little bit more efficiently and have a little bit more fun while you're doing it. Number 3, the value of communication, or not. You see, I was a big shot caller guy. I grew up playing a lot of sports and I was a leader, quarterback, did all the play calling. And I learned that that didn't really carry over very well in the Overwatch. I tried so hard. I made team calls. I called group up. I called ult plans. I even countered the enemy ults. I said, listen, this is what they're going to have. But it just didn't seem to matter because even if my teammates were listening to me, they couldn't always do exactly what I wanted them to do. It wasn't just from a lack of trying, although that was sometimes the case. It was just people were unable to follow up on the calls that I was making, or the calls that I was making were honestly not that educated, really not that good. You see, even if we were all on the same page with the plan, my calling that wasn't necessarily what was getting us to be on the same page. In fact, a lot of the times people didn't even need my calls to just follow me. And if they weren't going to follow me, then my calling it wasn't going to change that fact at all. What I learned with communication is more often than not, it was extremely toxic, a lot of negativity. A lot of things that I couldn't dare repeat in a video were being said over the voice comms, and more often than not, it was discouraging. See, even when people didn't say anything, when I put expectations on them because I had said something or I'd called a group up or I'd called a plant and they didn't do what I asked them or didn't do what I wanted them to do, then I ultimately put emphasis on them winning the game and not on myself. I'm a big shot caller guy, and I think the value of communication in a good coordinated team environment is extremely valuable. However, that's just not ranked. I recommend you doing the valuable thing, which is to communicate through your actions and communicate with your eyeballs. In other words, make sure that you're doing the thing that your character is doing at the right time by paying attention to what your teammates are doing. See, the biggest thing that I learned was actually it's more important to communicate by listening, by using my eyes and my ears to pay attention to what my teammates are doing and compliment them without saying a word. That way I could focus on what I'm doing, not necessarily worry about whether they're listening or what they're calling or what they're saying or whether they're asking me to swap or whether I'm asking them to swap. Just focus on yourself. At your rank, most of the communication is not going to be all that valuable. In fact, I'd say communication isn't all that valuable till even high Grandmaster. So don't worry about voice calls. People not listening to your calls or flaming you, it's not going to be, not what's keeping you in goal. Focus on what you need to be doing as an individual. And as I said, if you really want to communicate, focus instead of your listening. Focus instead of your watching and observing your teammates and look to play around them without saying. It'll save you a lot of heartache. It'll save you a lot of slurs. And you'll enjoy the experience a whole lot more. Fourth thing is keeping perspective. I think it was really stressful for me to go into each game feeling like I really, really needed to win. I needed to get on that win streak. I didn't want to get that 15th loss on the card, or I needed to get that 5th win on the card. Back at Overwatch 1, SR tended to give you the immediate result, won or lost. And sometimes you took a big hit on losses that you took. And it was even worse when you were like one game away from plat or one game away from dropping into silver if you lost. And those games were really, really stressful. But what I learned is that keeping perspective is unbelievable. And ultimately, that fear of loss and that, oh my gosh, the relief of winning the game is honestly what kind of demotivated me from playing competitive, because it felt like each game I was losing a part of my soul. And really, it was just a game. Ultimately, competitive, guys, and this is the bad news, it's really just practice. It's just you doing your best, but you don't necessarily need to win it, because the difference between competitive in-game and competitive out-of-game is that you can always just re-queue when you're in game. You lose a game, doesn't matter, re-queue. Lose out of start, doesn't matter, you'll get it back. And loss streaks are definitely tough. Win streaks are also definitely awesome, but ultimately, the overwhelming majority of the time, players are going to rank up and improve, crucially, over hundreds, if not thousands of games. Once I started to force myself to play a lot more competitive, focusing on my hero pool, focusing on my mechanics, focusing on communicating by paying attention to my teammates, instead of communicating with them directly, competitive became a lot more chill. Still competitive, still tryhard, and maybe a little bit sweaty, but it became a lot less stressful because I knew, it's a loss, it's just another one of those, and I'd re-queue. And eventually I became numb to the losing. Not entirely. Obviously, I was happy when I won, and a little bit sad when I lost, but the extremes of either action were a lot less potent. And that motivated me to just to play more. I had a lot more fun because I wasn't married as much to the result. It's important to remember that play the game a lot, you're going to be playing hundreds and hundreds of games each season. And so ultimately, one game isn't really going to matter. What's going to matter is the overwhelming number of trends and individual decisions that, if you're a better player, are going to carry your rank up. And if you're not, it's going to stay exactly where you're at. Now, to piggyback onto that, the fifth one, so how to make those hundreds of games productive? Well, it takes the value of goals, deliberate practice specifically. See, you can go into hundreds of games and play over and over and over and have the greatest perspective ever and be totally chill. But if you're not actually practicing something for at least the majority of those games, you might improve, but you're going to be doing so at an extremely inefficient rate. So you should go into every game whenever you're practicing, not necessarily playing for fun, but practicing. with the idea of what am I looking to specifically practice? Is it my translocator use as Sombra? Is it my shield management as Reinhardt? Is it I'm going to really work on my Widowmaker grapple management? Maybe my positioning as Ana. The limitless number of things that you can work on. Tough thing is decide on what you should work on. But ultimately, I actually don't think that's all that important. You don't necessarily need to be a coach or a wizard or a grandmaster player to know what goals you need to set. Take a look at your gameplay, use the replay viewer. And even if you're totally ignorant, look at your ability usage, look at your positioning, look at the decisions that you're making, and take some guesses. You know what? I actually think that I need to be doing that differently. Or what if I position here instead? How's my cover usage? And am I using that cooldown right? And if you're not sure, experiment. Set the goal of simply experimenting. I think that's the key thing. It's not necessarily that you're setting the goal of what do I need to improve. You might just have the goal of what am I putting attention to. See, the worst thing that you could possibly do is autopilot completely. It's normal to autopilot on some skills while you're working on another skill. That's normal. But you should never be going into every single game with just playing just to play, unless you're playing just to have fun. Playing to improve, if you're playing to rank up, which can be fun in and of itself, you need specific skills that you're working at. And that might compromise your ability to play at your best. I know when I was focusing on my primal mechanics, sometimes I lost awareness of where my team was, and I would end up feeding. Playing Winston and focusing on those details kind of tunneled me on the big picture stuff. But I was okay with that because that game was not about winning. That game was not even about playing well. It was about my primal mechanics. And I would keep practicing that until my primal mechanics got really good. And then I didn't have to think about my primal mechanics. And I could go back to thinking about winning the game. And that carried over with Zenyatta and my Harmony usage, and Ana and my corner usage, and even Genji and how I was using my deflector, how I was setting up my blades. I wasn't as interested in winning the game so much as using that game as a practice ground to develop whatever skill that I wanted to develop at that point in time. And remember, you don't need to be a big brain or a wizard to know what it is. You just need an idea of something to try. This is obviously a big topic, but those are the 5 things that I definitely wish I knew if I was in gold. Again, hope you found this educational. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and have a wonderful rest of your day.